Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Youth Room podcast. I am Keith and this is Ryne. And today we're talking about the 5 things that youth leaders need to stop doing. And number 5 is so important that we're actually going to do an entire episode on just the 5th one. So stay tuned for today's episode. Now, we are, again, talking about 5 things that youth leaders need to stop doing. Now, we have scoured the internet. We're involved with lots of Facebook groups, and we've actually built a, kind of a small community, but it's growing around youth leaders and youth ministry. We've been in youth ministry, and there's things that we had to literally just stop doing because it was just not good. But there's 5 things that we put together a list for, and number 5 that you're going to share, we're actually going to do an episode on just this one because we feel like it's so important. Yeah. But before we get into all these, how are you doing?
Doing great.
Good. All right, let's move on.
There we go.
So I feel like I'm all over the place. We were talking about before this started.
He's ADD.
I am like, my ADD is so like all over the place right now. I have like ADWT, which is attention deficit. What's that? And so when it comes to my focus level, I'm really trying to stay focused on it. So bring me back in if I'm on a tangent.
We're locking in. We're good.
So the first one is something that I've noticed is very prevalent among youth leaders, and I don't know where it originated. Like, I wish we had like origin stories of some of these things, like how they started. Like maybe we can actually take a guess on some of the things. I can actually, the second one I can guess on how it started, but this one I don't know where it came from, but it needs to stop. When we've brought this up, I've seen other people bring this up too in like these youth ministry Facebook groups, and there's other people. It's not like we're alone in this.
You're not on an island.
Yeah,
I don't think it bothers me as much as it bothers you.
It really bothers me,
but sometimes. I understand why it does.
I can tell you why. So the one thing that, or the first thing that I think youth leaders need to stop doing is say that they're loving on kids. Like when they say like, oh, we're just gonna gather a bunch of kids around and love on them, and to me, I don't know, like, I just think that's weird. Like, I mean, I wasn't raised in the church. Like, I didn't come to Christ until I was a teenager. But I can tell you, like, if I'd gone to a church as a teenager and the youth leader's like, thanks so much for coming. Like, we're just here to love on you. I would probably call the police. Like, I would think that that's, different meaning than and I know people are well-meaning and I kind of know what they're talking about, hopefully. But when it comes to that phrase, I think it's a very weird phrase to our cultural environment outside the church.
Yeah, it's like power in the blood, and like his blood is covered.
It's like my brain is washed with brainwashed with the blood of Christ. Like I've heard people like use. I'm like, that's so weird. Like that's just
haven't heard that one.
Okay, well, so when it comes to saying that phrase "loving on," I remember we had. When I first joined McLean's staff, the guy that hired me, Dale Sutherland, so he was a full-time narcotics detective, and it was a pet peeve of him. So I think I've inherited from him because, he was in like the criminal world. He's like, if you ever said that, even as a criminal, if you said that, you would be like considered a pedophile or like, it's like that. And so he's like, that was just even like a non-starter, like even in the criminal world, that was a line that they didn't cross. And so I was like, but we just flippantly say it, or I say we, other people in ministry say it. I don't say it because I just feel weird about it. Which we know what you're talking about, like to just demonstrate love, as commanded in Matthew 22 to other people. But when you say the phrase loving on, it just seems gross to me. I don't know. So I'm just saying, stop saying it. Maybe not like, I think cold turkey would actually be appropriate. If you're saying it regularly, just cut it out.
But if you're watching and you say it, we still
love you.
But we're not going to.
But we're not going to love on you, okay? Because that's taken a little too far in my mind. Okay, so second one I have, and this is something that we're passionate about, and I will say this is a little controversial because not everybody agrees with this, and I'll tell you why I'm passionate about this, and you know why, so I don't have to convince you because I think we're on the same boat in this, but. And there's places for this, but for the main priority of ministry, I don't think youth leaders should outsource curriculum. Now, there's ways of doing that where it's not really outsourcing; it's just like using it as a guide, or and there's a scale there, so it's not like you're just punting it to someone else to disciple your kids. Like, I mean, I think that would be the extreme. But what I think is dangerous in that when we outsource our curriculum or like we use someone else's curriculum, or, you know, it's almost like what we call like preaching in another man's suit. You know, it's like you're not really internalizing the truth of God's word. And again, maybe you're using curriculum to base your own, you know, messages off just kind of as a guideline, which I've done that before too, where I just use kind of like the structure, and then like I wrote a lot of the content from that, you know, that structure, and it helped like to kind of get me started. So I want to be clear on that. But one of the big things that I'm passionate about, I think that it's served us well, like in youth ministry, is don't outsource your edge that actually gives you, you know, passionate and compassionate, like, you know, shepherding ability to the flock that God has entrusted you with, your students.
Absolutely.
And so that's why I'm passionate about it. And because oftentimes, you know, when we look at even the book of Ezra, like where he, you know, read the law, he studied it himself, like he did what it said, and then he taught it. And so if we're outsourcing a curriculum, it kind of takes some of those steps out for us personalized. So I would say for your own self-care, soul care, like wrestle with the word of God, learn the truth for yourself, and then out of the overflow of that, teach to other people. And so I get it. Like not everybody has the context where they can, you know, even devote more time to studying or whatever. So, so I think that's where, and I was mentioning where I think this came from, is people are short on time. Like they just, you know, maybe they're volunteering in youth ministry, maybe they're part-time, or maybe, you know, they're consumed with so many different other things that they don't feel like they have the time. And I would say, try to prioritize that time. Like try to prioritize that time where, you know, and it doesn't have to be separate from, and I know there's a different thing with this, because even when I was in seminary, they're like, you know, you have like your seminary studying, and then you have your quiet time. And I'm like, but I'm like really learning some good stuff when I'm studying for seminary that like I can apply to my quiet. And so don't necessarily separate those, but like also when you're learning the stuff, don't always have the focus of how I'm going to teach it. So it's like, what does God want me to learn through this passage? And I'm going to study for myself, and I'm going to apply it to my life. And then praise God, like I have somebody that I can actually talk to about, like teach it to in a tangible way. So I would say outsourcing curriculum is another thing that I think we need to stop.
I completely agree. The one thing I will add though is we have access to some really great resources as well. So there is also like, you want to wrestle with it so you can teach and really it be what you know your audience needs to hear. I think that's one of the big things too, is like
it's huge.
When you talk about youth ministry in America, I mean, how many different cultures and how many different places and how many different, you know, all these different things going on. And I think it's important to understand that like your community is different than every other community. Your youth group is different than every other youth group. So I'm completely, you know, we're 100% lockstep on that. The one thing I will say is I have found success though when I feel like my voice might be getting stale, there is value. And if I know what I'm looking for, like in a video or things like that, not scrolling to find a video just to fill the time, but like, hey, I want a video that talks about this and I want it to talk on this. It has been helpful supplementing some of those things, but I'm still basing the curriculum. I'm still writing the small group questions. I'm still crafting it and bringing it in, grafting it into what we want to talk about. But I would say, you know, that is a resource that can be helpful, but that should always just be supplemental in nature and should not be the dominant.
Well, and I want to just throw this out too, is like I said, I mean, I'm always learning. So it's not like this is like thing I'll never, I do feel like this is something I'm passionate about because of my own personal experience, and also, I'm curious, like to see other points of view too. So if you're watching this on YouTube, I know like with podcasts and stuff, you can't really comment, you know, at this point in time, but if you're watching this on YouTube, let us know in the comments, like what do you think? Like, do you think it's okay to outsource curriculum? Like, and at what point are you doing that in your own ministry, if not at all, or some, or, you know, all of it. So where are you on that journey? And let us know in the comments with that, because that can help us to get feedback and learning as well. Okay, so what is on your list? So I have one more that I'll share, but I want to pass it over to you. What is one thing that youth leaders need to stop doing?
So we said number 1, saying loving on students. Number 2, outsourcing curriculum. Number 3 I have is, and I put it in quotes, invite nights. And the reason why I say that, I think a lot of people, and I think people even have success with them. So it's not to say.
So we should just never invite kids to
exactly.
So we should just never have those nights.
There you go. Summed it up perfectly. Yeah.
Maybe clarify what you mean by
Correct.
that, because I think that's going to be helpful.
Correct. I think I see a lot of youth ministries kind of almost build up hype around certain events or certain nights, and then they use language like, hey, this is an invite invite night. We're like, this is a night where you really want to invite your friends. And while I think that's good, I completely understand what we're trying to do, which is get more teens in the door so more teens can hear the message of Christ. Awesome thing. But I think subconsciously with teens, I found early on in my ministry, they kind of go, oh, so I don't really invite my friends the other nights. I just invite them to the invite nights. I just wait for the big event, and that's when I bring my friends. And so in our ministry, we kind of saw the opposite. When we stopped doing the bigger events, that was kind of like, hey, we're trying to subconsciously be like, invite your friends because this will be fun. Or when we kind of stopped doing that, we actually saw just visitor numbers increase across the board. Because then we just said, hey, who do you want to experience what you're experiencing right now? Who do you want to learn what you're learning right now? And when we said that, it started to connect with them more to where I'm not inviting them because we're playing a cool game, or I'm not inviting them because we're doing a fun event. I'm inviting them so they can hear the message of the gospel. And that really struck more at the heart of what we were trying to do and really get behind, because what you win them with is what you win them to. And so when you have big invite nights, I'm not saying outreach events are wrong. We still utilize them. We still do great things. But it's not a, hey, store up your 10 friends you want to invite to youth group, save it for the invite night because you'll get a special prize.
Well, and to be fair, I don't think anyone would ever say that. No. Like, no, it's like, don't invite them on a regular night.
Correct.
But I think subconsciously we might be communicating that, where it's like, okay, I have to wait till the
I want my friend to have a great first time experience, so I'm going to wait for this.
And that kind of holds us accountable too. Like, I feel convicted on that too. Even since talking with you about this, about how we need to make, like our regular programming exciting enough, or, I mean, not like that it has to be like off the wall, like exciting, like we're not there to entertain, but I like the way, I think you phrased it this way. You said, if you like what you're experiencing here in this faith community, invite other people that need to experience that too. And we should be having such a genuine community of asking questions and growth and sharing the gospel, training people on how to share the gospel, that like any of our programs could be invite worthy, so to speak, because they want to see how the body of Christ is interacting, and they see that as attractive, no matter what night it is, or if we have inflatables or not, or laser tag, or what, so we want to make sure that each week that we're doing something, it's like and so that was convicting for me, because I'm like, oh man, like, is it something that like I would actually be comfortable with people coming to a lot of new visitors, or and I think that can kind of tell, like, from your students, like, what, like, do they feel comfortable inviting their friends on a regular night, and that might be telling as well. All right, so I'm going to save the fifth one for the last. So the last one that you have, I'm going to save that. So I'll cover so the first one we had was saying loving on, which is, I think, is still, I even like saying it, I cringe a little bit, like every time I say it out loud. Outsourcing curriculum, which, like, change our mind. I'd love to hear, some other people's perspective on that. And I get, like, time can be time restraint can be, I just think, like, if you're outsourcing your competitive edge of, like, really owning scripture and shepherding people through that, it might not be helpful long-term for discipleship. And then we talked about invite nights, to just have every night as a means of invite culture to youth ministry. And I think this one is crucial. And I feel like I've switched this, because I, for a long time, was known for doing this really well. And I think I had to go through and I'll explain why. So in a nutshell, this is what it is: focusing on games and polished program elements too much. Now, I will say a caveat: I work at a mega church, so when I first started here, we had the staff and the resources and stuff to pull off amazing programs. Like, I mean, they were polished. We had them, like, down to the minute in planning center. Like, we had. I mean, it was great. Like, we had a team that would, like, brainstorm ideas and games and all that stuff. And so that was when I was at our main location where I first started. When I came out to the Princeton location where I'm at currently, it's just me. I had a part-time staff and we have a part-time staff position open now, but right now it's just me. And so I had to be like, okay, there's not like a team of people planning this.
Every
anymore.
other youth pastor watching this, Keith, is like, welcome to our world.
Exactly, yeah. So in other words, I relate, I feel like I have to give that disclaimer, because they're like, oh, well, yeah, I roll like you work at a mega church. Like, I'm like, but I really am the only guy running our youth ministry right now. Like, I mean, we've got great volunteers.
And somebody watching is like, you're getting paid to run the youth ministry.
Yes. Yeah. So no, I get it. I still am blessed, and I still, but with that though, I had to switch from that, because I spent a lot of time planning, the program elements, and, like, and now I think if you were to come to, like, if anyone was just to walk in my youth group knowing that like what I used to do and what I do now, they'd be like, what are you doing? Like, because we don't focus that much on it. And I think, and we are growing, like we're growing, and we didn't need that. So that was one thing that I've talked to you about too. And I've talked to a lot of other youth leaders about developing a to don't list where, and this is kind of, this is a tongue in cheek, way of us communicating things that are pet peeves of ours. But when it comes to seriously sitting down, and there might be things on your, time blocks in your weekly ministry that you don't need to be doing anymore to make more of an impact. And so they might be low leverage, high time activities that you don't need to, and that was, for me, that was what it was. So right now I play games now. I have enough experience where I have tons of low or no prep games in my brain already where I can on the fly lead a game without any supplies and all that stuff. And we rotate through those and stuff, and it keeps it interesting. So we do games, but I don't have such a strong emphasis on it to where it's like the be all end all, like where I used to have like, polished program elements and all that stuff. And because of that, like I've seen that kids don't care as much as long as they're part of that like relational involvement of the, so in other words, any games I do are I just said do, any games that I do, we are youth pastors. I mean, that's, all right. Any games that I do, I actually have a purpose for them now, not just like, oh, we need a time block of our, so sometimes we go longer, like if we just are praying longer during our prayer block, sometimes we won't do a game. And so anyways, with that, I would just say be cautious of focusing or overemphasizing games and polished program elements, in that. And I would even say a lot of the teenagers now like aren't really looking for, I mean, yes, they want to have a social thing, but we have a larger block where we just have more like free time. And that's served us well. And of course we have stuff that they can do like during that free time. Some of them just like to hang out and sit down or whatever and chat or whatever, but we do have Gaga Ball for the middle schoolers. And there's music playing and stuff. So like it's just like a fun atmosphere, but not as much of a structured, organized, part of the program as much anymore. So, all right. What is the last things that youth pastors need to stop doing?
Yep.
And before we get into your answer for this though, who sponsors this podcast, Ryne? And what kind of resources are made available as a result of this?
This podcast is sponsored by Edge Club, and Edge Club is a on-campus middle or high school Christian club that focuses on equipping students to share the message of the gospel with them on their campus and in their lives and on their teams. And so our goal is simply to connect students to Jesus and to the local church. And so if you want to check out more resources on that, we actually have a resource vault specific now for youth pastors and youth leaders, and we'll continue to add to it. But these are all free resources. It asks for an email just so we can continue to resource you. But we have nothing to sell you. Nothing is behind a paywall. Different resources on camps and different resources on how to maximize the most of your daily programs, how to track gospel conversations, all different sorts of things. And the biggest resource of all is our free student evangelism training, which you can use and send to your students. They can watch them. You can watch it in one youth group night. You can send it to your students and challenge them to watch it individually in modules. You can break it up in youth group and use it as a series of 3 lessons. But it's all free. And so go to edgeclub.org/training and you can check all of that out. And so make sure to head over there as soon as this episode is done.
So the 5th one that we're talking about is, drum roll,
downplaying social media, which is interesting because when I said this, you were like, I don't really use it that much. And here's what I will say. If we have limited amount of time, we would all agree that, okay, social media might not be the best use of your time. If you're running this on a volunteer basis or a part-time basis, I get it, right? And I haven't always been great about social media. The one thing I will say that's kind of changed my mind lately is we've started using social media more, and I've started to see the effects of it. And so I think a lot of people are like, well, social media, we're just, we can't compete and they're on their phones too much anyways, or, we shouldn't be on TikTok because it's a bad, or other people are just like, well, we don't have the resources or time to do social media. And I get all that. I really do. But at its heart for us, what we found is our social medias are the front door to our youth ministry. Yeah. And so whenever a first timer comes, we're able to follow them on social media and it's kind of the world they live in. It's kind of the currency that they exchange. And so then they see us as engaging in the world and being in the world that they live in. The other thing I think too is, I'll mention this more in our upcoming episode where we're going to dive into 5 ways to maximize, social media for your youth ministry.
Yeah.
But we can reach more people in a 60-second clip with the gospel than we can entire year in-person gospel conversations. Now, that's not to say that in-person gospel conversations aren't more impactful, and relational evangelism isn't our best way to evangelize. But at the end of the day, it's not like we have thousands of followers. I think we have like 200 followers on our Instagram account, and we're able to do it through that. And so even just a YouTube platform, if you can upload it and send some things, but I think that's a big thing.
So with YouTube specifically, like that is like a no-brainer in my mind, like to be producing video content on YouTube. Because I mean the stats, I think I want to say it was 92% of teenagers are on. It's the highest platform.
Yep.
And people, it's like, I don't want to do TikTok. It's like YouTube is like the easiest way to start, with videos and stuff. So even if you're just recording your messages, or if you're just recording, but don't see it as like an announcement aspect, but really like sharing, like more inspirational.
Focus on inspiration, not information.
Yeah, and so 3 types of content that are performing the best across all platforms are what they call education, inspiration, or entertainment. And so I think where we get it wrong is that we try to fit in that entertainment category and we just fall flat, because compared to the world, we're not. I mean, there's people spending billions of dollars to reach these teenagers with entertainment.
One in particular, yeah,
and they're making billions of dollars too, and so with that, to focus on education or inspiration as the primary types of content on your social platforms, I think it's gonna go a lot further than we can. And we've seen this too. Even like this is why we focus on this podcast and producing short clips from it and posting it to multiple platforms, is because we've seen so many results of helping more people with our ministry, just because of creating content like this. So I think it's an underutilized resource as well. So we're going to cover a whole episode on that coming up, where we're going to go into some of the social media aspects and how we can leverage that for youth ministry.
Yep.
So let's get in. Oh, before I get off this topic, I was actually having conversations about Instagram specifically with some teenagers last night, and I learned something that I didn't know. And so some of these teenagers are creating what they call spam accounts.
You don't know this?
Did you know this?
Oh, yeah. So if you go to follow a student, they won't have any actual posts on Instagram.
Yeah, and they have like a separate, like
a spam
almost
account.
like a private spam account, they call it, where they can just like post stuff like.
You've never heard them called Finstas? Like
fake Finsta, yeah.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's where they.
What does Finsta mean though? Like
fake Instagram.
Fake Instagram. Okay.
But it's like their real one where they post everything. And so it also works as like a front door for like mom and dad, something to educate parents on. Is like, mom and dad follow my main social media account, so they just think I don't really post anything and I'm not that active.
Yeah.
Then I have this spam account that sometimes I link, sometimes I don't link, and that's where I can really just kind of post whatever I want.
Yeah.
So it's also something to be aware of when it comes to just working with teens in general.
So anyways, just in case you didn't know what that was, I learned about it recently, and I thought I was pretty up and up with the. I mean, I am an Instagram influencer. I mean, technically, but totally different category. Totally different category, like with my bike business. But I don't know all the ins and outs of how teenagers are always using it. But okay, so let's move into some rapid fire questions. And so This is I think a good question. I might have to think about this as you're answering it, but what was the most impactful series you've ever done with your students? Oh, actually, I know my answer now. Yeah, now that I've said it out loud.
I think for us, we've had a lot of series that do a lot of cool things. Now, if we're talking most impactful, in my mind, that's like the one the students really dove into the most and really drummed up good conversations. We do one called So Much. Did so well the first time we brought it back. Did a part 2.
So Much?
Yeah. We did it.
It's called So Much?
No.
Oh, okay.
They enjoyed it so much that we brought back part 2.
Okay, I thought I misheard.
Yeah. It's called TikTok Theology, and I think I've shared it before, where I go and actually find TikTok Reels or Instagram Reels, TikTok Shorts,
Which
YouTube
have you
Shorts.
put, do we have these we don't have these in the resource vault yet.
I'll add them. I'll add the link to all the videos.
This is going to be in the resource vault soon.
Yep.
Make sure by the way, we're constantly adding stuff to that. Like it's not just like a one and done thing. Like we're always improving it.
Yep. And so
100% free.
Those videos, they're real. And so I play them in front of kids and be like, what would the Bible say about this? Not what do you think about this? What would the Bible say about this? And so some of them are solid theologically. Some of them are not so solid, and some of them are just not true at all. But they all come from Christian accounts or accounts kind of attacking Christianity.
A lot
And
of
so
deconstruction
it
stuff
kind
and-
of takes it real to where they're like, oh, this is something I might actually run into and see.
Well, and what's fascinating about that is like when we see, like a lot of times when we see stuff, we're like, oh my goodness, I rolled this guy. Like he is totally saying like, and I bet you people are believing this.
Yep.
But when our students see it, they're like, oh yeah, he's got a good point.
Yep.
And, like, cause they might
just
not know the
assumed if it's
discernment of like,
Christian. Yep.
yeah. And so with that, I think, that's important to like show that in a safe environment, like to where you can,
Yep.
you know, address like some of the maybe holes in the theology that they're talking about.
Yep. What about you?
So we did like a dinner and dialogue series back last summer, and it was so good, like it was so effective for our students. And the way that we did it was, and I think I've talked about it on this podcast before, but and it was just basically from the premise of like learning a lot about this generation, how dialogue driven they are about their faith. And so I was like, well, let's do that. Like we did like we kind of had a gap between, you know, our summer schedule and when we were starting our fall stuff. And so I was like, I'll treat them to dinner. Like we'll, you know, cater some dinner or whatever at youth group, and we'll have a topic for that night that I'll give them the previous week so they can, you know, look into it if they want to. They don't have to. But then we had I basically would present an argument of the opposite of what I believe, like, you know, from the Bible. And then I would say, prove me wrong. Like, and then I would open up the conversation. So some students would just watch the whole time. They wouldn't you know, listen or observe. Others would be active. Like they'd actually prepared like notes and so like, you know, arguments, whatever. And what it was good to do was for them to see, and then I would basically argue for the opposite, you know, like in other words, I would play the devil's advocate, so to speak, of how to address that. And I would be pretty brutal. Like I would like destroy some of their arguments because I knew
as brutal as the YouTube comments.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah. And so when it came to that dialogue series, it was really helpful for them to kind of be like, oh, like that's what other people would say if I brought up this. And then I would like fire back with, and then I would derail them. I would try to, you know, like, and then so the way that we kind of distinguish it is that I would wear a hat and I'd wear it backwards when I was talking, you know, like as the advocate or like the devil's advocate, like the opposite. And then, cause like cause then I would like get in and like I'll start teaching about like the right way to address this. And I was like, you brought up a great point here, but this is how I would share it. But I would turn my hat back around when I was like their youth pastor again. And so that was just a way for us to physically distinguish like, okay, like, what are you saying now? Or who is talking now, you know, as far as, and it was really good. So good that we got so much good feedback about it that we wanted to implement that as a regular thing. So we still do it occasionally. Yeah, I mean, just as like an intro to a topic that we're covering that night, and it's been really good. Not cover dinner and everything, but not make it the whole thing, but yeah, it's been a really good series for us. Okay, so first timer gift. And we talked a little bit about this when we did like newcomer follow up.
We did.
But
yeah,
in case they missed that episode, because now we're even growing to the point where I think some people haven't seen stuff that we've done in the past.
Yeah.
But what is your favorite first timer gift? I'll just say mine flat out, a Ferrari. I mean, we like to give all of them a Ferrari.
Hot Wheels.
Hot Wheels. No, I'm just kidding. No. All jokes aside, what is your first timer gift that you like to give out?
We they're actually, you have to purchase them at cost. Or excuse me, a bulk, but they actually make sense. We do custom lanyards, and the nice part is you get to hole punch information.
Yep.
You can also take little bags and put some custom bracelets or stickers. Kids love stickers. You put them right on the lanyard. Works in so many different ways. Number one, they actually use them. Yeah. So I see kids coming back with now
they
their
have like
keys,
on their keys or something,
which gets confusing when they leave their keys and then they all have the same lanyard. But there's cons to it. But the biggest pros are, number one, they keep them. Number two, it allows us to interchange the gift essentially. So like we can get new stickers and put them on there, bracelets, stick them on there. But then three, we also have a card that shares the gospel on that lanyard that they can go ahead, our leaders or student can share with them as they come and say, hey, here's what we're all about. So every kid who comes hears the gospel, no matter who they are, no matter what night they're coming, they hear the gospel. First thing they hear, and it's in a non-threatening way too, because they came to church. Yeah. So if you want to check more about that, that's actually in the resource vault too. You can check out that that resource.
Shameless plug.
Yep.
First time gift. So yeah, I feel like I'm gonna steal your idea of the lanyard soon. I think I'm gonna seriously we've been evaluating like how to best do that. And I like your idea so much I want to start using it. But in the past,
resource it.
Resource, not steal. One of my favorite things. It wasn't like a gift, but and I don't even know how we did this. Seriously, like I remember back, I'm like, how did we pull this off? But somehow we were so intentional about newcomers that we would get their, contact form, whatever, name, address and all that stuff. And then we would have these like gift baskets that we would put together. It had candy and like a welcome, like a thank you for visiting and all that stuff. And we would send someone to their house and deliver them before they got home.
My kid wouldn't be coming back.
And now that I look at it, I'm like, yeah, I don't know if that was it was effective. Like, I mean, people were like blown. I mean, and it was always like, it was really encouraging. Like they were like, wow, like you went that far out of your way to.
Yeah.
So I don't know how I pulled that off. Like just physically, like how many, I mean, like.
Spoiler alert, most middle schoolers don't know their addresses anymore.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. We're just like, this is actually in the middle of the ocean. We're not sure where it lives.
I know the street.
Yeah. So anyways, that was my favorite first timer gift, was like basically a care package before they even got home. It was like in their, we'd stick it at like a sign in their yard or like a thing in their yard.
Yeah.
We wouldn't like, deliver it to their room or something, but, or inside their house, like Amazon has the option. Did you hear about this? Amazon now can come into your house and put packages like, there's like an option for that.
Okay. Maybe I'll look into
Maybe it may, I need to check my sources on that. It might have been one of those like,
follow up your
Onion
students
News
who tell you
article,
about the spam answers.
Yeah. Anyways. Okay. So last rapid fire question. What was the most cringeworthy moment as a youth pastor?
I was thinking about this and I was like, I don't really know. And then I was like, wait, nope, I got it. So mine was actually pretty recently. This was, and in the grand scheme of things, it's not that bad, but for me, I was mortified. So at our winter camp, so my most.
Before you get into this, how would you define cringeworthy? Like
cringeworthy is like where you're the most embarrassed as the youth pastor to be the youth pastor. Like,
oh, okay.
Like now it could also be personally, but like for me, it's like the one time where I was like, can somebody else please be in charge? Like, I don't want to be the youth pastor. So my most cringeworthy moment as a youth pastor was actually this past winter camp. We go to the same winter camp every year. There's a bunch of different churches that come. They put on a great program. But there's always a dodgeball tournament on Saturday night. And it's like a huge dodgeball tournament where there will be like 20 teams participating. And we have a lot of high school guys. We have a lot of high school guys who are very competitive.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of baseball players who are very competitive. Some of them are new believers, newer to the faith.
Yeah.
And so we were in the semifinal game, pretty intense. And the other team wasn't exactly the most honest. And so our kids were hitting some of their kids and they weren't going out.
Yeah.
And they have refs who are like really good. But there was one kid in particular who got hit 3 times and like in the chest and like wasn't going out.
Yeah. I was like really.
And so our kids kept getting out and they were coming over and they were just getting more worked up and more worked up and more worked up. And again, some of these kids are newer believers and they started like going after refs to like get in their face and like yell at them. And another camp staffer's like jumping in and be like, hey, don't do that again. And I'm physically restraining kids at a youth pastor as hundreds of people are watching this dodgeball tournament. And I literally had to like ejection style professional sporting event, like escort them out of the gym and be like, we're done. Somebody else will get your stuff. Like we're not doing this anymore. Yeah. So that was the probably the biggest time where I just wanted to hide and be like, somebody get their kids. They're not.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we had a missions trip to Kentucky one time. It was a domestic mission trip and we took a group of middle schoolers and we had this whole bus and I'm thinking, man, it's like a long drive from Virginia. So it's like an 8-hour drive or whatever. I think something like that. So I'm like, to break up the monotony of the drive, every hour on the hour, I'm going to invite someone up to share, testimony or their favorite verse or, something like that. Like just to kind of make it spiritual where it's not just like, keep things focused on the Lord. And this is my idea. Okay. So there was one guy on our trip that middle school, 8th grade boy. And I said, do you want to come share, one of your favorite verses? And he's like, oh yeah, I'll come share my verses. So he opens up to the passage of scripture where he's like, if anyone looks lustfully at a woman, he is guilty of adultery. And then he starts to give a commentary on it. And he's like, guys, this is something I really struggle with. Like even right now, like as I'm up here on the bus, like I'm tempted to like really lust after these beautiful girls on this bus. And I was like, it was like my idea to like invite them into like sharing, and he was like heartfelt, like share, but it became a cringeworthy moment where I was like, all right, we won't do that anymore this trip, and I was like trying to give him like encouragement to like share his heart, but at the same time, it's like that was oversharing, dude. Like you don't share that stuff in a mixed audience.
Nobody wanted to sit next to him on the way back.
Yeah. And so anyway, so that was one of the many that I've had over the years, but that one came to mind, where I was like, yeah. And even the bus driver was like, they kept looking in the mirror like, what is he saying?
Especially
like,
if they're not a Christian. You just a random bus driver.
Yeah. So that would say the rapid fire question, most cringeworthy moment as a youth pastor. We would love to hear your most cringeworthy moments.
Make us feel better about ours.
Yes, make us feel better. Maybe we can even share them with other people. Maybe we start I know like the Youth Group Chronicles stuff.
I don't think we compete with them, but
yeah, they do an amazing job. But yeah, cringeworthy moment as a youth pastor or youth leader. Let us know. We'd love to hear. Okay, so some 1 minute questions as we close this episode. So first one you're gonna take. Do we have a 1 minute timer?
My phone. I don't have my phone, but I got my watch.
Okay, perfect. Yep. Okay, so we have 1 minute on the clock, and the question for you, Ryne, is why did God put the tree of knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden?
Yeah, a lot of people ask this question because they're like, well, if God knew we were going to mess up, then why'd he even put it in there? And, when it really comes down to it, there's some things we just can't understand. This might be one of them. But my answer to this question when I get it is simply God didn't want robots. And so God allowed the choice to be there so that Adam and Eve could either choose to follow him or choose, the opposite. And so the reason being is because God didn't want robots. He didn't want people who were programmed to follow him no matter what, because if you have kids, it's nice when your kid behaves, but when your kid behaves just because they want something or they have an ulterior motive or they have to, it's not really the same. So that would be my answer for that is, one day maybe I'll ask God that question myself, but I think it's because God didn't want robots. He wanted people to be able to have a choice. And think about it. He said, you can do anything you want, just not this tree. And we ate. So.
Yeah. One law only.
Yep. All right.
How do we do on time?
Oh,
right at a minute?
59 seconds.
59 seconds, of course, man. You're like a clock yourself.
All right, Keith.
All right. So what's my question?
Yes, and you actually talked about this in the evangelism training, and that's why I wanted to have you answer it. Okay. So Keith, Christians, man, can't stand them. They're so arrogant. Your question is, isn't it arrogant to believe there's only one way to heaven?
Yeah, I think the best way to describe that would be to look back at human history and look back at scripture history, where we see that God gave us that one law in the garden and we broke it, right? So we went from eating a piece of fruit. The next generation's sin was murder, Cain and Abel. So sin grew from eating a piece of fruit to murder in one generation. It got so rampant that God decided to flood the earth, start over with one family, Noah's family. And still, he wasn't the prime example of awesomeness, right? He had some weird, awkward moments. Go look in scripture for those. But then you see that time and time again, Israel, after Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they weren't even model people for that. They rejected the Lord and compromised their integrity. And then we turn away from God so many times in the Old Testament that he sends prophet after prophet after prophet, and yet we reject God. And then he sends Jesus, his son, to the earth to rescue us. And what do we do as humankind? We kill him. Mm-hmm. And so when I see that question of, isn't it arrogant to only believe that there's one way to heaven? I think it's arrogant to assume that we deserve more than one way to heaven when we look at all the second chances God has given us. So I'm surprised that he even gives us one way.
Minute 17.
Oh, man. Went over on that one.
Kids wouldn't listen to the last.
You can probably cut it
seconds.
down. Yeah, you can probably cut it down.
Sure. I'll edit it for you.
Edit it down. All right. Okay, so that concludes our episode today on the 5 things that youth pastors need to stop doing. And if you're watching this on YouTube or other social media channels, we'd love for you to like, comment, and share so that it helps other people see it. If you're listening to this, make sure that you subscribe to the podcast so that you can get these regularly. And we'd love to hear your feedback. If there's any questions that you have for us, of course, let us know, and we'd love to answer those even on the podcast. So thank you so much, and we'll see you guys next time.